Hello everyone, and welcome to this special weekday Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by eBay Motors Group, with Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters across the franchised and independent dealer sectors.
Well, welcome back to the podcast, Robert. Great to have you back on. You've joined us to chat through some of the highlights from your 6-month interims to the end of August. And these are the first 6 months to include the Helston acquisition from last December. So to give our chat some context, how has the onboarding of Helston gone so far?
I think it's gone pretty well, actually. We had an integration plan. We had a formal committee and a project leader, and it obviously involved shipping at some times up to 50 people from the rest of the country down to the southwest, which they thoroughly enjoyed. We've now got the businesses on our own systems. We've now got everything rebranded, either Bristol Street Motors, but predominantly Vertu. All the web things work. Clearly a lot of training required. So we've done quite a lot to build the Vertu brand, particularly sponsoring Plymouth Argyle, Exeter Chiefs Rugby, Somerset County Cricket. We've been to all the big shows down there. And it's a great area for cars.
Yes.
Solid demand down there. And we're now a major player. So I think actually we've got to be pretty happy. Have we finished? No, but to be honest with you, we haven't finished any of our business, and we've had some of them 17 years. But I'm pleased with where we've got to, and I think there's plenty more to come. I think we need more resource in the dealerships. I think we can do more volume down there, both in after sales and in sales. So there's big recruitment going on, but I think we are happy with where we are.
Because I think last time we had you on, Robert, you described the Helston acquisition. It's probably one of the more complex acquisitions that you've done or anyone's seen in the industry. But from your description there, it sounds as though the integration is going according to plan.
The actual mechanisms of purchasing it was torturous in terms of buying and selling. But actually the actual execution has been good. And, we're doing a lot of training down there. We get Dave Anderson, which many listeners will know, trainer from California, been over to the UK a lot. We get him to do an hour Zoom call once a month to all the managers in the former Helston businesses, going through our culture and, how we actually do things. And a lot of that does follow Dave Anderson's principles. So, we're putting a lot of investment into developing people, and there's been quite a lot of internal promotions, divisional promotions from within the Helston ranks. Our BMW sales director for the whole of the UK, is a Helston man from down there. So there's a lot of opportunities for people, and that's always good, isn't it, when people see that?
Yeah, definitely.
And in terms of the financial announcement, I mean, you've announced some record revenues, up 11.7% year-on-year profit growth. Do you want to? And I know within your financial announcements, you've talked, obviously, I think I watched some of your updates this week about the investment into apprenticeships and things like that. But do you want to talk us through some of the highlights of the results?
Yeah, I mean, the financials are fairly straightforward. Even though we've got agency in Mercedes, which obviously reduces turnover, turnover's gone up to record levels, 2.4 billion in the 6 months. Profits up, which is good. Dividends up 21%. Actually, net debt was up, which we don't have a lot of debt. Obviously, we don't really use used car stocking loans and stuff like that. But we have pushed more. We did push more stock in back end of H1, which will certainly be reducing front end of H2. That has actually positively impacted our sales rate, I'm pleased to say. The operational highlights for me may seem slightly esoteric, but we've had, as with the rest of the sector, phenomenal rises in Motability volumes, very strong margins in new fleet and in used cars. Our used car margin in H1 was actually higher gross profit per unit than in H2 last year, which is good. On the downside, we actually had a lower used car volume, down about 5.7% like for like, but that was because, as you'll know, Phil, we had, we were doing big 0% events, big media splashes, and you can't do 0% at the moment. So we had to rebalance volume and margin. And we're through that now. We've got, prior year comparators have got no more 0% events in. On the after sales side, really good actually stuff. We completely looked at our strategy of retaining and recruiting technicians. I'm pleased to report we've got 54 more technicians at the end of August than we had at the beginning of March. And that is a massive increase in core technicians. That's not even in the new dealerships, that's purely like for like. So that should bolster our after sales revenues and speed up the time it takes to prep used cars, which has been a massive issue for the business and for the sector. You know, everyone's got older used cars, they need more cosmetic, they need more mechanical. You know, it takes 4 hours, not 2 hours. And I think some of the pressure in used cars that has been around the length of time it takes you to prepare cars. So I think we're happy with that. The other highlight is accident repair centres, smart repair businesses going great guns, significant improvement in profitability and margins. Our strategies of which work providers we work with in accident repair centres has been phenomenally successful, far more successful than I ever thought it would be. So the final thing to say is, you know, not many people know, but Bristol Street Motors has the highest prompted brand awareness of any franchise automotive brand in England, which it never used to have. We've grown that really quite substantially for a variety of means, and I think that powers our business really. Bristol Street Motors website is their engine room of what we do, and you know, we've got significant. You know, I think it's important we sell lots of cars in the next 3 months. We've got, you know, big TV campaigns. We're hardly off the television in the next 3 months, to be honest.
And you know, you make a point. I mean, you can visibly see it in terms of that investment in that Bristol Street branding awareness. You know, right across various different medias and sporting events and things like that. You mentioned earlier the obviously the technicians, and I watched the investors update, and you made a point obviously in that about, you know, the payback from investing in those technicians in terms of that return on investment, getting those technicians in, the apprenticeships into the business for future revenue because of that opportunity in that after sales market.
Sorry, Phil, can you repeat that? Because Andy Goss tried to ring me.
So saying you made the point obviously about that technicians and the aftermarket and after sales investment, and I know that on your investor update you made a point obviously the investment and time that you put into recruitment around that apprenticeships, around that technicians, because the payback that you get from that area is huge for the business going forward.
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously looked at this, and you know, paying technicians has clearly moved quite substantially forward because there's been a scarcity, and market forces obviously have an impact. But you actually look at how much profit a technician actually generates for a motor retail business, and we worked it out after paying the technician, it was about £115,000 per technician per year in retail service and parts. Now, it's a big number, but bear in mind we have big premises, you know, big overheads, you know, there's a lot that's got to cover. But the more technicians you have, clearly the more gross profit you generate, assuming you've got the work. And I don't think we're short of work, I think we're short of technicians. So we've had a real push, variety of things, flexible working for technicians, you know, 4 days on, 4 days off, that sort of thing. Massive increase in apprentices coming through, though that takes 3 years. Looking at transfer and conversion, so people can come in from the likes of Quick Fit and Halfords, and we can train them in very short periods with the manufacturers to get them up to franchise standards, and they become franchise technicians, and I think that's a good thing. We've actually put more marketing spend around technician vacancies, so we have been pretty focused actually on making sure that we had the right strategies, because if you'd have asked me 6 months ago, and the answer would be different to the question today, but if you asked me 6 months ago what the biggest problem was, it was lack of technicians, full stop in our business.
Yeah, so it's a clear investment in future, isn't it? That's as you say, you know, that future growth. You can't just, when you get the demand, you can't just go out and find those technicians to support it, can you? So you've got to build it for the future, haven't you?
Oh yeah, it's vital. It's vital for today, never mind the future.
And Robert, you've talked about after sales, how it performed across the business over this period from March to August. Were there any other highlights in terms of vehicle sales across new and used? I mean, I was interested in what you said at the top about Mercedes-Benz division is the only one on pure agency at the moment. So it's
Well,
you're starting
Volvo's
to see
there as well. Volvo is there.
Yeah.
Actually, we've got 2 on the job now.
And how have new sales performed, across those brands?
Well, I mean, you can see from the SMMT numbers that the volume, well, I think it's early days for Volvo. You wouldn't like to comment on Volvo, would you? But Mercedes has been at it since the 1st of January.
Yeah.
And implementation, I think, was very smoothly. I think we've said that, in terms of systems and everything. I think they did a great job. Clearly, volume has been down. You can see that in the SMMT numbers. The question is why? And I think it's way too early. And there's far too many factors. The problem with our industry is it's blinking complicated.
Yeah.
There's lots of reasons why volumes can go down with the manufacturer. So I don't think we can ascribe that to agency per se. I think we have to wait and see. And actually, I think our volumes in Mercedes have significantly improved actually in the last couple of months. So I don't think you can after 9 months conclude very much, if I'm honest. You've got to. There are a variety of reasons why volumes can go down with the manufacturer. And I can give you plenty of examples in the past in the franchise model where volumes have gone down. So I don't think you can say it's agency.
Yeah. Sure.
Overall, and actually this was fairly well publicised, wasn't it, post our results? Because I did sort of tell people what I thought. The battery electric vehicle demand in retail is weak. I mean, the SMMT said that yesterday. I was pleased that they actually had a similar view on life that I did, which was useful because it would have been embarrassing had I said something that wasn't right. But let's be honest, there are no incentives from the government to purchase battery electric vehicles, which may not be as convenient from a charging or fueling point as a traditional car, and indeed are more expensive. And that is clearly a problem. And whereas the fleet market has seen, surge in supply, pent-up demand from post-pandemic, which wasn't serviced by the manufacturers, really plugging that. I think, interestingly, salary sacrifice for electric vehicles is shifting to maybe, to some degree, retail demand from retail into fleet, which actually skews the numbers a bit, I think. We've been very successful supplying salary sacrifice schemes. But if you're going to get to 80% by 2030, you're going to have to crack the retail market. And no one has a real idea on how to do that, really.
Yeah, there's more questions than answers, I suspect, Robert.
Well, I mean, the government, don't get me started on the government. I mean, what on earth went on there? What went on there?
Well, Robert, whilst we've got you on that theme, in terms of new car sales and stimulating the retail sector, what sort of impact do you think moving the ICE ban back 5 years will have on retail demand for battery electric vehicles?
None.
None whatsoever. No.
Well, I mean, it's certainly not going to accelerate it, is it? I think we might have found ourselves in a bit of a bind where the government's pronounced, don't worry, customers, you've got till 2035, when actually the zero emission mandate changed absolutely nothing. And 80% of cars have got to be battery electric vehicle by 2030. But the customers now got the impression they don't need to bother. I think that's an extreme view of it, but I mean, that's broadly where we are. And that is unhelpful. There's plenty of other words you could use to describe the situation, but unhelpful is one of them. And I actually couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that they would make such a public announcement, which, I think JLR described it as pragmatic. I think that's a decent word. It certainly reflected some of the issues that there are, motorway service stations now having security guards on electric charging points to stop fights. I mean, you couldn't make some of this stuff up. John Lewis Insurance pulling out of electric vehicle insurance. And the press with a right mindset of negativity over the whole subject, haven't they? I mean, they can't pick the paper up without finding an article about electric vehicles. I am about to get my first electric vehicle, which will be quite interesting. I'm assured it can get me to Turfmoor and back on one charge.
Okay. I'm sure you'll let us know. Or maybe not, depends on the manufacturer.
I'll be coming to your house to charge up. So
You're lucky. You'll be lucky.
Yeah.
You might get a cup of coffee or tea, Robert, but you certainly won't get a charge because I've no charger.
So I think to be honest with you, I feel really sorry for the manufacturers because there's been this real push. Why we went 5 years before everybody else was a mystery. I mean, that was odd. We're in an integrated European car market. I don't understand why Boris did it, but then Boris wanted HS2, which made even less sense. So, we're in a bit of a pickle, aren't we? And the manufacturers have put all the investment in. They've got all their plans. They're electrifying. The government told them to do it. There are reasons why it's a good thing. And then the government sort of keep moving the goalposts. And I don't necessarily think that's the last time they'll move them.
No, you do feel that, because you say, it's okay saying you've got another 5 years, but at the minute, as it stands, you've got 20% availability. If, that's on the assumption that the OEMs haven't gone EV by that point anyway, after 2030. So it doesn't really give the consumer
a lot
choice
of our
after
manufacturers,
2030.
a lot of our manufacturers will be EV only way before 2030.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I don't think the British public have any clue at all what is going to happen because it's going to be predominantly EV.
Yeah.
And to get predominantly EV, you might have sky-high ICE charge prices to push people into BEV. There might be a complete and utter lack of supply. Well, if they've gone pure EV, there's definitely lack of supply. It's zero. So I think there's a lot of water to go into that bridge in 2 general elections.
Yes. Yeah. And like you say, it just doesn't help because of the messaging that it's sending out to the consumers.
It is, but I mean, we've got to do our job, and we've got to educate the public, and we've got to be honest about the challenges. Make sure we don't sell electric vehicles to people who shouldn't have one. There are plenty of people who should have one, and we have to do our best as an industry to try and educate the government. I think because that worries me that they don't really understand it all.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we're in danger of getting into deep politics here, Robert, and we better try.
Well, I mean, that's the reason we're getting into deep politics, though.
It's what they've done.
It's a brutal fact that the government has decided that ICE engines are a negative thing and have decided to ban them. So there we are.
It's creating
is it?
Yeah. No, it's creating confusion and complexity and a significant revenue business for the UK or sector, isn't it? That's with the
and then you've got this rules of origin thing, which is another mystery to me, actually, where we've got tariffs potentially. So I think there are quite a lot of things. I think we've got, as an industry, just get our heads down, do our best, sell the cars we've been given, and run businesses. And we'll have to leave the politicians to be politicians, I think, and hopefully the SMMT and the NFDA have some success lobbying.
Yeah, and getting some clarity and some, getting that care. Because I think at the minute the message was sent out, it was more about the confidence in the UK and that they keep moving things and there's no clear direction and things change. Then how do you invest? How do we, generate investment?
Yeah, but bear in mind, the manufacturers are not investing for the UK car market, are they really? We're 3% of the global car market. We're sitting in a European integrated car market. So this idea that the manufacturers are doing things specifically for the UK, I struggle with.
Yeah, they ain't waiting for Rishi to make his mind up, are they?
Not really, are they?
They're not sat there going, let's see what Rishi's got to do next and we'll plan. But anyway, September. Let's bring this back to how September has gone because, we know 21% up year on year for September. Still, depending on what pre-pandemic period you look over, 20 to 30% still behind a pre-pandemic September with some significant heights in some of those September performance. We're talking about ZEV mandate and, reports where OEMs are holding back a little bit on EV for this year now because they want to try and secure the 22% for next year, which the ZEV mandate is a whole world of complexity in the way it's set up and buying and selling credits and that you can take future debt on and pay 3.5% and not pay any fines. There's all sorts of complexity, but it's starting to play into OEM strategies and things like this and reports where we may see the registrations, but we're not necessarily seeing the car itself in the month of September. But we will try not to go there. How was September? Was it as expected? And do you think whatever happened in September
Well, I mean,
will see its way into
it was a
October?
strong month. It was a plate change month. It is, significantly the biggest profit month in our second half. Our second half goes from 1 September to end of February. Clearly, there was buoyancy in the new car market. Actually, I thought retail performed well. S&T numbers were strong on retail, I thought, compared to where we've been. Fleet was very strong. There was, clear appetite from the manufacturers to generate registrations. It felt pretty normal. Actually, the world is getting far more like it was pre-pandemic. There's no doubt about that. It's got some slight different tinges, but life is getting back to normal. Used cars, I think, are the interesting one, more than new, actually, in September. Because as we said in the statement, and I thought the cap commentary was fairly interesting. Depreciation of used cars, I think I'm right in saying this, was the biggest fall in September since September 2008.
Yeah.
Which, let's be honest, wasn't the best of years, was it?
No.
So I think that's interesting. And is this the start of a depreciation trend on used cars? It was, in my view, quite highly concentrated. Not in BEV, where it's been concentrated. I think BEV's all right, actually. We've gone on and bought hundreds of electric vehicles, used cars, recently. The problem was in the higher end stuff. And that's where I think that's where the problem was. And for a variety of reasons, but clearly, I think I'm right in saying used cars are 25% more expensive than they were in Jan 21. And I think that's going to edge backwards. And I think stock control, stock turn, speed of prep is going to be absolutely crucial. Now, we don't know what's going to happen in the next few months, but we have set our stall out in terms of where we want to be. And I'm sure everybody else has similar views, to be honest.
And Robert, final question for you, and really follows on from that. What is the short to medium trading outlook for the group?
Well, I think retail demand is actually pretty stable. Probably more stable than people would think with very high interest rates compared to historic. I don't think there's a shortage of inquiries. I actually think the issue will be used car residuals, if there is an issue. I think on the after sales side, it's all about resource and generating gross profit. And I think having more technicians gives us some optimism. We hope to execute a few acquisitions along the way, and control costs. So business as usual, really, isn't it? I think we just got to take each month as it comes, get better as a business. I did speak, and Phil probably heard me in one of the broadcasts. One of my biggest sort of focus areas is conversion at the moment and sales skills. I think we've been through a period where there were more customers than stock. We became order takers rather than sellers, and those old-fashioned concepts of info seek, test drive, objection handling, closing, which, to be honest, are crucial, are much more vital than in the last 3 years. And we've got a big task to upskill and get back to those basics in our business.
And you make an interesting point in the interims about used vehicle sales volumes are improving. What about the supply? How's supply looking at the moment for used vehicles?
I think supply is something, I wouldn't say normalising, because there's this 3 to 5 year age group which is just missing and it's going to weave its way through. But if you want to buy cars, you can buy cars.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, and there's some good points. I think we are. There is business to be had. There is opportunities out there. There is product to be found if you're prepared to put the effort in and find it. I think everyone and hate using the term, but we talk about back to basics. But we are in that place now, aren't we? That
100%.
we're back into a depreciating marketplace, condition, prep, ownership, history,
And actually,
spec is
last
all
year,
key.
from this point on last year, the world got harder. So we've got comparatives now that weren't fantastic anyway.
Yeah.
So, the aim is sell more cars than last year, like for like. That's the aim.
Yeah.
Move the stock, keep it moving, buy cheap, sell, normal stuff. And we are very, very focused on that, I have to tell you.
And I think you made the point, and it's always been said that we can talk about the politics, we can talk about all that stuff, but there's an element that there's certain things that you can talk about and help influence, but not necessarily control.
I mean, one of the things we say in our business is we control 80% of the factors that determine our success. There is no point fixating on the 20% you can't control because you're wasting your time. Yeah. You've got to understand them because they might have an impact on you, but no point worrying about them. Yeah. So if we increase conversion by 2%, we would be flying.
Yeah. Get your margin, reduce your cost, conversions, just those little incremental movements.
Yeah.
I mean, we could talk all day, and we better not, because you've got other things to do. You are Andy Goss a call back as well, so we'll let you go. Fantastic as always to catch up. I mean, as I say, if you do run out of charge, by all means, give me a shout. I'll bring you a flask. Not sure I can help you with the charge, but I'll certainly bring you a flask of coffee or something, Robert. But
no problem.
Pleasure and fantastic results, and well done with the onboarding of Helston and the performance as well. So thanks for catching up.
I listen to the show every week, and you do a great job for the industry. So well done, and thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Robert. Speak to you soon.
Thank you very much for that. Thanks Robert.
Thank you for listening to this special weekday Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by eBay Motors Group. Philip and Curtis will be back with the week's big motor retailing headlines on Saturday. Live, on demand, wherever you are, and on your podcast feed. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with Philip and Curtis, come on the show or send a press release, then email them at motortraderadio@yahoo.com. You can also join the Motor Trade Radio, LinkedIn and Facebook groups, or follow the podcast on Twitter. You've been listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, bringing you all the chatter that matters.